Okay, we might just finally be getting the hang of this. So today on Project GT6, let's finish up the exhaust for good. We've been calling this series a RestoMod for a while now, but lately I'm starting to wonder if Pro Touring better defines what we're up to. I mean, yeah, we did start out restoring the car 7 years ago, but after building a completely custom chassis to house new suspension, larger brakes, a V8, 5-speed, and a raft of mod cons on the way for later, you tell me. Am I wrong? Am I right? Does it matter? Maybe it is still a RestoMod, but we've just taken it past that. Regardless, we're going to give this new naming a shot and see if the almighty algorithm prefers it. Anyway, we've gone over all of this work in the previous episodes, which you should really check out. And most recently, we made great strides in this area, with a muffler and tailpipes already in place, and just the remainder of the downpipes and a few hangers left to build. So, you know what comes next. How hard can that be?
You had one line, dude.
If you're just finding the project, I certainly hope you'll hit that subscribe button and even share the series with some friends. It would really help us out. Alright then, let's quickly assess the situation in a bit more detail. The muffler has an internal X-pipe with dual inlets and outlets, which have a slightly larger diameter than the rest of the system, so it can all slide together and get tightened down with some band clamps. This keeps everything removable and somewhat adjustable. Out back, it all first goes over the crossmember before dropping below the diff and heading out the sides. And by the time this episode's over, we'll have trimmed down the tips a bit, as they're definitely too bazooka for us right now. In front of the muffler, the downpipes, or up pipes, depending on how we feel in the moment, travel over this crossmember with that amount of clearance, before promptly taking 45-degree turns outwards to clear the transmission, and finally straightening up to head forward again. Like I say, there really isn't much room through here, with only 3/8 of an inch in places, but there were only so many options, and you have to keep in mind this is 2.5-inch tubing. So the scale of everything is simply way smaller than you can grasp through a camera. Regardless, the remaining gap between the manifold here and the downpipe here is what we need to connect today. And with a few missing pieces of the floor and transmission tunnel, we do at least have some access to see our way through this task. Frankly, it shouldn't be quite so hard as I originally imagined, but maintaining clearance will be the key. Rather than listen to me yabber on in exhaustion in this clip, the plan we've come up with is to use 2 more 45-degree bends to not only drop things down to a more suitable working height, but also meet up with the rest of the system, which should look a bit like this. Yes, it's just precariously mocked in place to get an idea of the room we have to work with, and as we and some of you expected, those threads are definitely going to be in the way. So let's just cut them off. You gotta keep in mind, the Crown Victoria that the whole front end came from used these studs to secure the control arms to an absolutely massive set of bushings. And while they may have been deemed necessary for a 4,000-pound Vic, our little car can get away without them, just like Mazda did with the FC RX-7. So, cutting these off should prove no issue, but we definitely will come back to beef up the brackets, as I agree that they could benefit from some additional girth. With the trimming done though, we can resume mocking up the pipes to see how fitment has improved, and happy with the outcome, we spent some time with the chop saw and got this, which is fitting really quite well, but we can't actually weld it up just yet. As you can maybe tell, we've got a potential problem on our hands. Somehow, all this piping needs to be removable, not least because of routine maintenance, but also because we need to weld them on the bench, and I don't want to have to pull the body off to do so. Keep in mind, one end of the piece is a slip fit, so we need forward motion to remove that, and the other end is a 2-bolt flange, which is a bit easier to work with, but can only move downwards. I think the only solution, therefore, is going to involve a couple of these. V-band clamps. 3 or 4 stainless V-bands to be precise, as why the heck not? If you've never heard of these beauties, they're pretty interesting. 2 interlocking rings slip over the exhaust piping and get welded in place. And this V-band is essentially a giant hose clamp with a V-shaped groove welded to the inside face. As you tighten down on the T-bolt, it pulls the clamp together, forces the V-groove to bite down on the rings, which in turn pulls them together and seals the joint, all without the need for a gasket. These aren't the most expensive units available by a long shot, but nonetheless, they're still not exactly cheap either, in case you were wondering why we've only just now decided to use some. With one ring, or flange, whatever, already tacked to the up portion of the up pipe, keep in mind that we had both halves butted together before, so we'll need to remove a section from this piece so we don't end up pushing it backwards into the crossmember. The black lines here are from measuring the difference under the car and adding the dimension taken from the flange itself to find exactly how much needs to be removed. And with that taken care of, we can slap it all back in place again to see if it actually worked out the way we intended. As ever, things are tight, but predictably tight now, and there's plenty of room around the V-band for clearance and accessibility of tools. The pipes over the crossmember are being shimmed to keep the space here in check, and although this point is also a bit on the tight side, it's nonetheless fitting as well. Best of all, you can just about make out the bolts holding the flange onto the manifolds, which means we've got a line of sight to get a socket and extension on them from below the car. So then, not too bad. That's a pretty tidy solution, and we should be able to closely replicate it for the driver's side in a minute. Even from inside the car, you can make out the pipe just exiting the muffler, moving over and traveling all the way up to the manifold, which is great, as we need to get some tack welds to hold the pipe and flange together, and doing it in situ is the best way if possible. For reasons only explainable by my OCD, the MIG welder was out of the question here, so let's attempt to get the job done with the TIG and finger button.
That's hideous, and I don't think it's actually going to. Well, that's not working.
Attempt being the key word here.
And I think the answer is it's not working. Not working. This isn't working at all. I think I got it! 115 amps is the key, 65 too few. So we've got ourselves a downpipe, the passenger side at least. It's two pieces. We got a V-band in the middle, we've got a 2-bolt flange on that side, and we've got a just normal band clamp on that side. So we're using an whole sort of potpourri, is that the word?
Potpourri.
Potpourri of clamps. All to make the job just sort of work and fit. This is dictated by the manifolds, of course. This is dictated by clearance and the ability to not have to have them slip fit, because then you need extra length and extra distance to move things around. And this end was a slip fit just because that's what the muffler had, and we just thought we'd go with that. So we just got things sort of tacked together right now. We've got this little flange just tacked on as well. So let's fire up the welder and try to see if we can zap some things together before the end of the day.
And
that is one completed passenger side downpipe. It's turned out pretty decent on the whole. Some of the welds I'm not going to show you, but other ones are pretty good. The V-bands we were able to completely just fusion weld, which was great as a socket adding filler, and they turned out pretty consistent. A little bit of warpage in the flanges, which I guess is to be expected to a degree, unless you sort of bolt the V-bands down to some other chill block or something, I guess. But it made it up just fine, the clamps holding it together. We went all the way around the inside of this top flange, and then I also just added a few sort of structural supports on the outside. So I think this thing's ready to pop into the car and see if it still bolts up to where it's supposed to go.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Ah, thank goodness. Not only does it still fit, but I dare say that it's even pretty stylish. The V-band solution has worked out perfectly, and installation and removal is about as much of a breeze as we could hope for. Clearance to the crossmember hasn't changed one iota, and we've used the radius of the bend to our advantage to sink the pipe as far rearward as we could for clearance to the transmission, while also leaving just enough room for some heat wrap through here. There's plenty of room to the floor for some heat shields, and even the most awkward section heading up and over the frame rails has turned out pretty nicely. This section will also get some heat wrap to protect the firewall and starter, and even the starter itself may get its own little blanket to keep it nicely snuggled away in there like a bug in a rug. On the whole, we're pretty darn pleased with how this is turning out so far, so I guess there's only one thing to do.
Oh, I got one for this. You'll love it. Pete and Repeat were in a boat. Pete fell out. Who was left?
Repeat.
That finishes all the exhaust pipes. It's been a wild drive, but that's awesome to have that done. So the next step we can do is hangers. And we got these awesome little snappers, I believe they're referred to. Snap together like that. And what you're left with is an 1/8 inch gap in the middle. And this side has sort of a little washer, and you can put a bolt through there. And what we're gonna do is take this 1/8 inch 304 stainless steel and cut out some little pieces that are sort of shaped something like that with a little curve at the bottom. And they can get welded on like that. And then we can space this out however far we need, weld that onto the pipes. But I think that's the next step. This is why you have a plasma cutter, people. Or a friend with a water jet table, which we have neither of. So if any of you have a water jet table and live in Canada and want to be our friends, write to us at fanaticbuilds@gmail.com. Thank you.
Soon, because we're starting this
right
today.
now.
So we're going to need some cutting fluid. That is for certain.
We have such a thing.
Usually I'd say WD-40, but in this situation, maybe we could find something better than that. Yes, it's true that pretty much these exact hangers are available for purchase online and would have saved us quite a bit of effort, but making them was about $150 cheaper, so yeah. Now, it's great to have these and all, but for reasons we'll go into more in a second, before we can install them, there's another little task we're going to need to take care of first. We have tried hard to reduce the number of times that the body has had to be removed over the course of this build, as it's not exactly a 2-minute job. However, with the engine crane helping out on one end, I do think we've at least found the easiest tactic. It must not have been off in a while though, as check out what was hiding under there. Now this is awesome and all, but before we get too engrossed with everything here and lose our daylight, the reason why we've got to this point is the rear of the frame needs some attention. Remember back in episode 14, we mentioned that we might just redesign back here to put in a step? Well, now's the time.
Well, we wanted to leave the body on, but it was going to be very awkward to get into this area, so we pulled it off. At least it wasn't that bad of a job. And it's pretty cool to be able to see all of this work. Nothing here existed before the start of this series, so that's pretty cool. And what we're going to do now is we're going to mark this up, then we can get to it easily, cut it off, and just this rear section will be removed. And then when we put it back on, we'll actually just set it down 2 inches lower than it is now. That aligns it up better with the rear bumper mounts so that it's more in the zone of transferring an impact. It also gives it an area here where things can bend rather than just shoving this whole bar into your back. And it also lets us get the fuel filler neck in above this a little bit more easily. Otherwise we'd have to go in somewhere down on the lower half of the tank and the neck would constantly be filled with fuel, which we don't really like. So I think what we're going to do now is just mark it up and get cutting.
Very interesting.
Oops. Oops. Didn't we need that part?
Ironically, with that part removed, it's looking a bit familiar around here, as that's pretty much exactly how the original frame was designed. Spooky, isn't it?
We just needed these two little pieces, which take a surprisingly long time to cut out when all you have is an angle grinder. We've chamfered all the corners, so we're just going to get those tacked in place. That drops it down to 2 inches, and then that will get that tacked back up to there, so it'll all basically be the way it was, just 2 inches lower.
Getting this squared up will require some attention to detail, tape measures, and you know what? We've used that level up on our phones so much that we decided to splurge. Just to annoy you though, we're not actually dealing with any zeros here, as apparently the car isn't quite leveled out perfectly according to this new piece of kit, and we can't be bothered to fix that. So, we're just going to make sure that all the faces are on the same angle, which ultimately tells us the same thing in the end. Sometimes my internal sloth just wins out to my OCD. This should make access to the top of the fuel tank much more reasonable for a filler neck, and as an added bonus, the rails will also be closer to the tailpipes, so our special exhaust hangers we've been working on won't need a huge receiving bracket. Yes, you heard right. The mounting tabs will need brackets. You're welcome. Before we get to those, though, the first set of hangers will be located on the transmission crossmember, as you can see here. And our idea is to weld in a couple of nuts directly to the box tube, as why not? It really can't get much easier than that, right? To start with then, we've chucked up a couple of nuts in the drill press so I can take the flap wheel and turn them both into nice round blanks.
So, Michael,
How am I going to get it loose?
well, this is exactly what I was thinking. I'm thinking in the same vein as me forgetting to put my ear blocks on and you forgetting to tighten the nuts first.
We'll get some
When you
strips on
did
it.
tighten
I'm not
them,
concerned. I'm not
you left the wrenches out as if they're going to be useful in taking it off.
Yeah, well, they're not.
They're not.
With the position decided on, we clamped the mounting tab down to a shim to get some tack welds on there, and followed that up by marking the crossmember for a pilot hole, which was then taken out with larger and larger drill bits until we could finally weld the nut in place permanently. The pipe got thrown back in again to check things, and that stainless tab is now even fully welded up. So this side's pretty much a done deal. A key point in here, though, was making sure our hanger location wouldn't prevent the removal of any piping. And I'm happy to say, it doesn't. The passenger side pipe needs the same treatment, of course, and with its corresponding hanger tacked in place, we're back at the bench to weld around it too. And just like that, in a matter of seconds, we've got a matching pair of hangers nicely buttoned up. As close to symmetrical as we could realistically get, and they really hold things nice and tight, so there's no worry of anything ever hitting in this area. In fact, that actually completes all the exhaust from the engine to the muffler. Finished. Done. Finito. Cool, let's move out back. This is where we're going to need those brackets I mentioned, and the design will pretty much echo the stainless parts, but in mild steel and without the annoying concave curvy bit. With those captive nuts in place, that's these little guys finished up, and we can crawl under the car and get them tacked into their new home. We started at the very back because we felt like it, and it's probably smart to lock in the position of the tips before we potentially throw them off by doing something further upstream. The stainless bracket is square to the pipe, as an angled fitment there would require more grinding and effort, and this didn't. I actually used TIG for the stainless parts and MIG for the steel ones, which just helps cement for me that no matter how bad I am at TIG, it is still a way nicer and cleaner process than MIG. Splatter is not fun. But anyway, flush grows back, and that gets both sets of these pipes held in place back here, with fitment looking nice and even from side to side. Access for tools is very reasonable, and we're still keeping in mind that this needs to be removable, as honestly, it's easy to get ahead of yourself if you stop thinking for just 1 second. We did make 8 stainless hangers, but in light of how the car is turning out, we think 6 will suffice. So the last 2 will find a home in this area here and brace off that 1x3 frame member. 2 more steel brackets then get whipped up exactly as before, and I think this should work out very well. The pipes have to slide out of the muffler, keep in mind, so the orientation of the hangers is critical. And although you may think we're going to have a fun time getting these rear sections out, fear not, there's a trick to it that will work to our advantage. The section of frame we're going to weld to still needs the mill scale removed before we go any further though. So it's out with a grinder and strapping disc to clean that up. And although this scale is extremely annoying to eradicate, these discs do seem to work better than anything else we've come across. Those last hangers have now been clamped in place and checked for fitment, and we can get in there with the TIG exclusively this time, which, along with my new fancy flexi head, allowed for decent quality tacks to get the job done. So, bam! Huzzah! The entire exhaust system is in place, welded up, and now hung. I really hope these videos are conveying the excitement around this moment, as literally months of work are now seeing their way through to completion, and we couldn't be happier. There's only one thing left to do. Those tailpipes. I've said multiple times that they are simply way too long right now, and that was completely on purpose. We're going to make a few minor tweaks back here later on, so we wanted to leave ample material so we wouldn't accidentally come up short. Some of you may have been wondering what our plan was for the truncation back here, and honestly, even we haven't quite known what to do until now, but we've decided that this angle of the taillight surround is really nice, and we should transpose it down to the pipes. So our fancy new level is used to find the number of degrees to transfer to the digital angle finder, which then allows us to mark up the pipes for length and set up the chop saw, which we've now reverted back to the factory configuration. I'll be honest with you, this is a bit of a tense moment. If we get it wrong, it's not just as simple as welding the piece back on again, as the inner face of the weld would be visible and ugly. But anyway, George have to do it. After triple checking and over analyzing everything, we just decided to send it and now have this, which was promptly followed by this. Cool. They've also been carefully deburred, as although they'll need some polishing later, this is the finished tip design, so we wanted to be sure they'll look as clean as possible. While we were back by the welder, we also took some time to finish up those mounting tabs, and with all that done, there really is nothing left to do. What a load of work, but it's definitely been satisfying. Most likely because it's shiny. It would have been awesome to end this episode with some sound clips of the system, but we're quite a ways off that being a reality. Regardless, it's amazing to have this done, as that really does cross off the entire system for good.
Or does it? There is one last thing we need to consider here, and it's something I need your input on. Everything we've built here is solid.
There's nothing to allow for movement other than those band clamps in the middle, and even there we're not talking about much. The hangers are high-temp silicone that also really hold things in place, which is great as we don't want a lot of movement.
But with all this firmness going on, are we asking for trouble?
Even the engine and transmission are both held in place by polyurethane mounts, and from a ton of looking around online at different exhaust designs, while I think we might get away with exactly what we've got here, there is a part of me that wonders if some flex or bellow sections right here would be wise.
There's two good reasons why I'd rather not do this if possible though. One, quality parts are expensive, which leads us on to two, cheap or expensive units are still prone to failure, which is ironic considering the point behind using them is to prevent the failure of other parts in the first place. So what do we do?
Why don't you just go read the comments?
Sure.
Oh, and just in case you were wondering, we will be needing at least one oxygen sensor eventually, but we've allocated some room for that already. Anyway, thanks for watching. Next time we'll be changing course a bit and heading up front, so if you haven't yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share the series with some friends. I really can't thank all our amazing patrons and donators enough for their continued support, and if you'd like to help out too, please check out the link below. Stay up to speed on social media at Fanatik Builds, and we'll catch you later. Thanks so much for watching.